Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. Today on the program, his stint in the judiciary reaches the finish line.
I've been in the Supreme Court for 18 years. I think I deserve a rest.
But his fight for the West Philippine Sea continues.
I will, of course, continue my lectures until the Filipino people and the world will be on the same page on the West Philippine Sea.
Calling on the president to never stop asserting the arbitral ruling against China.
93% of the Filipino people want the arbitral ruling asserted. I still have to work on President Duterte and the remaining 7% of the Filipino people.
And his thoughts on key issues, the war on drugs, and the vice presidential protest. Retired Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio joins us live. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pinky Webb. A retired Senior Associate Justice of the Supreme Court vows to convince President Rodrigo Duterte to assert the arbitral ruling. He stresses the need to continue fighting for the country's rights in the West Philippine Sea and tap other countries to join the effort so that China can be, quote, pressured to abide by the ruling. Also, his thoughts on the prospect of Vice President Leni Robredo as a drug czar and the fate of the electoral protest of former Senator Bongbong Marcos against Vice President Leni Robredo. Let's go straight to the source of the story. This is the first time I'm going to say this on air. Retired Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. Justice Tony, how's retirement?
Well, liberating because I don't have to worry about reading stacks of pleadings every night.
Imagine
or
that.
Including early morning if I don't finish my reading at night.
Do you miss it?
No, not yet.
But you think you will?
Well, I think I will have enough work to do on the West Philippine Sea, so I will not be missing it.
First week as a retired justice after 18 years, sir, what is the one thing that you were able to do that you were not able to do in 18 years?
Well, I overslept.
How long did you sleep?
Well, I slept until 10 o'clock in the morning.
Really? And at what time do you normally wake up, sir?
Well, I wake up early at about 5 o'clock.
There you go. Now I understand why that's very liberating for you, sir. You had a number of, well, Thanksgiving dinners. One was during your birthday and another one with some journalists, and I'm sure others that I probably was not able to catch, sir. But what was telling what you said, apart from helping the Philippines and the country assert what is truly ours, is that you said that you will be writing a weekly column?
Yes, I will write a weekly column in one of the major dailies. Actually, I was writing a column before I joined the court, so I'll just resume that work.
And this is for the?
Well, Inquirer.
The Philippine Daily
Yeah.
Inquirer. All right. When does this begin, sir? When does it start?
Maybe January of next year.
And what will be your first column?
Well, it will be about the West Philippine Sea.
No surprises there, sir.
No surprise.
Okay, so you were described by Associate Justice Marvick Leonen as the best Chief Justice that we never had. What do you say to that, sir?
Well, I think I take that as a compliment. At the same time, a little disappointment because I did not make it, but I cannot really complain because under the Constitution, it's the President who appoints from the short list. And if you don't make it, well, that's the Constitution. You can't change anything there.
So there was obviously some disappointment there, sir. What kind of Supreme Court or a Chief Justice would you have been?
Well, of course, I would continue doing the same thing, applying the law to every case based on the law and the evidence, of course. And I would, of course, work to make the judiciary more efficient in terms of disposition of cases.
Especially at the lower court, sir?
Yes, especially at the lower court because that's where we have a lot of backlog.
Which I think also Chief Justice Lucas Bersamin was looking into also. So that would have been probably a legacy, probably, sir, if a Chief Justice would be able to expedite cases, especially at the lower courts?
Yes, that would be a good legacy, but it's really a continuing effort. All Chief Justices must work towards that because it will not be resolved in just 1 year or 2 years or 3 years because we have a basic problem. The ideal ratio of judge to population is 1 judge to every 20,000 people. But right now we have 1 judge to 35,000, about 30,500 people. So we will always have a backlog because we just don't have enough judges. But we can make the judges more efficient and probably bring down the backlog. But eventually, we'll have to add more judges. We have 100 million, 110 million people, and I think we only have a little over half of what's required under international standards.
You have someone such as, for example, Chief Justice Teresita de Castro, serving for, I believe that was 3 months, if I'm not mistaken,
About that.
sir. You have Chief Justice Lucas Bersamin, served for about 11 months.
That's right.
And then you have Chief Justice Peralta, who will serve more or less 3 years. What I really wanted to ask you, sir, does it help that you have Chief Justices who serve for such a short period of time?
Well, it would be ideal if they will serve longer, but of course, we cannot compel the president to appoint only those with longer terms. But this can be remedied if we have a long-term strategy for the Supreme Court, and that long-term strategy should focus on disposition of cases to streamline the rules of procedure. And I think it's happening now because we have come out with so many rules streamlining procedures in the court.
But seniority is very important, sir,
Well,
in choosing the next Chief Justice.
well, it's important in the sense that you carry with you, if you're a senior, you carry with you a lot of experience. But of course, it's not in the Constitution, so the president can appoint
Yes.
anyone in the short list.
Yeah, I just wanted to find out your thoughts inside the judiciary because that's the same question I asked Associate Justice Marvick Leon, and also, importante ho ba daw yung seniority? And that's also what he said, sir, the kind of experience that you actually bring in the Supreme Court. What was the legacy of Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio? Would it be the no backlog cases, sir?
Well, that's one probably, but I'm not the only one. There are some who also achieved that. And I think I have decided cases basically based on the Constitution, based on the evidence, and in the best interest of the Filipino people. And I think that's why I've been appreciated by a lot of people because I've focused on that. And I've also went beyond my duty by defending the Philippines in the West Philippine Sea. So I think that's part of the appreciation of our countrymen, but that's the way I look at it.
A friend of yours, he didn't really use this word, sir, but almost said that he didn't use the word liability, but that's how I'm describing it. It's as if that if you were Justice Carpio's friend and there's a case, huwag ka na munang umasa that the friendship would affect the decision of the case or otherwise. In fact, parang sinabi niya, mas mabuti pa nga kung hindi napunta kay Justice Carpio yung kaso mo kahit na kaibigan mo si Justice Carpio.
Well, I had this policy that, first of all, I immediately inhibit if the lawyers were my former partners or associates. Second, if you are close to me, I will inhibit automatically. So I tell my friends, if you want to have dinner with me, that's fine with me, but when you have a case in the Supreme Court, I will just inhibit So you choose what you want.
And what did they normally choose?
Well, they choose to have dinner with me.
All right. Sir, I want to get your thoughts on other things in the judiciary. What are your thoughts on Chief Justice Peralta, Giustado Peralta, sir?
Well, just before my retirement, I talked to him and I said, because we have this, we created a judicial integrity board and a corruption prevention and investigation office. That was during the time of Chief Justice De Castro during her short stint. But this was discussed a long time ago and we finally approved it. And I said, and we consider this very important to maintain honesty in the judiciary. And I asked him, will you now implement that? He said, yes, I'll implement that right away. And in fact, during the flag ceremony, his very first flag ceremony as Chief Justice, he announced it. And I'm happy about that because it's very important in maintaining an honest judiciary if you have a judicial integrity board and an investigation office. Right now, everything is ad hoc. If there's a complaint, we create a committee. After the committee makes its report, the committee is dissolved. So there's no permanency. It's good to have a permanent body because everyone in the judiciary will be aware that there is a body watching over them.
Who would you say you most admire as Chief Justice, sir?
Well, it's Chief Justice Concepcion and JBL Reyes.
Sir, I think it was Chief Justice Artemio Panganiban who, I don't know if it's called a resolution, sir. They want Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio to receive the benefits that are given to a Chief Justice. What does that say about how the justices perceive you think, sir?
Well, I think they appreciated my work. But to clarify, it's really in the law because if you're in the government, if you retire, you will get the retirement benefits of the highest office you occupied, whether you occupied it on a temporary basis.
I see.
And that has been applied uniformly in other departments, but it's the first time it was applied in the Supreme Court.
Because no other senior associate justice had to sit as an OIC, sir?
Yes, I think so.
And that was you?
Because, but not just a temporary vacancy. There must be a permanent vacancy. There are many occasions when the Chief Justice left for abroad and an acting Chief Justice was designated, but that's not the case. There has to be a permanent vacancy. That's in the resolution of the court.
We'll be taking a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, retired Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. He says you can call him a DHO. Sir, what's a DHO?
Die-hard optimist.
Because he's going to spend most of his time, he says, fighting for our sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea. Let's listen to what the Senior Associate Justice said during a dinner very recently.
At age 70, I plan to spend most of my remaining waking hours defending our sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea through the means I know best, through the rule of law, the great equalizer in disputes between a militarily weak country and a nuclear-armed regional superpower.
What's the first thing that needs to be done, sir?
Well, we have to assert the ruling, and there are many ways of asserting the ruling. I have enumerated all of them, but unfortunately, the present administration has not adopted any of them. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel because, and I've supported the Duterte administration on this. We signed the Memorandum of Understanding on joint cooperation on oil and gas exploration. And then we signed again the TOR and we implemented that. And I think this is if this pushes through, if we finally come to an agreement on this, by the two companies, commercial companies, Sinuk and Forum Energy entering into commercial agreement, then we would have found the solution to a South China Sea-wide settlement of the maritime dispute. And I think that's huge because the maritime dispute in the South China Sea is considered as the most intractable maritime dispute in the world today.
But there were also two options that you mentioned, sir. Number one is for China to accept the arbitral ruling, which you said is not possible at this time. And number two is to entice the international community because China needs the world here, sir. That's something that you've talked about over and over again. And there are other alternatives and options that you've discussed as well. But why do you think the Philippines is still not doing the second option?
Well, because the president has decided that he would want to get loans and investments from China. He doesn't want to displease China. But I think we're not getting anything really big from China. The loans are not coming. They're bogged down by so many administrative problems. However, the ruling is there, and because we keep on discussing it, and the world is discussing the ruling, China is forced to strike a bargain with us. And that bargain really is the MOU and the TOR. Because if you look at the MOU and the TOR, China impliedly recognizes our sovereign rights. But in exchange, they will be allowed to be the commercial partner to get the gas and get 40%, which is normal because that's the industry practice worldwide.
This is where you call it, Justice, how do you call it? Implied admission.
Yes, there
Yun yung
is an
sinasabi niyo.
implied admission because we cannot really expect China to expressly admit in writing that they lost to us and they waive any claim to our sovereign, to our areas. But it amounts to the same thing. We have to give China a face-saving exit because the Chinese government has been telling the people, their people, that they own the South China Sea. They cannot just turn around and say, we were wrong for the last 50 years. It's very difficult. But so we have to help them by giving them a face-saving exit.
So again, you're saying this need not be put in writing because basically China will not do this.
China will not do that, but China will sign, they signed actually the MOU and the TOR, which amounts to the same thing. It's an implied admission, it's just the same.
So this is the answer, sir.
That's the answer.
This is the solution.
That's a solution, and I understand that the Chinese also offered the same terms to the Vietnamese. And the Chinese also see it as the solution, the South China Sea-wide solution. So we really must focus on this now because we don't want this to slip this solution to slip out of our hands.
Is there anything, sir, right now in the MOU or the terms of reference that we need to look into very closely because there could be possible slip-ups or misunderstandings?
Well, we have already studied the MOU and the TOR, and we're satisfied it's ironclad. But there are other things that have to be implemented to close everything, to make it final. Like, we still have not designated the two companies that will lift the gas. It should be Forum Energy, because they have the service contract now in Reed Bank, and Sinuk. That's the last step. Once that's done and they come to an agreement, then we've found the solution.
What if it's not them, sir?
Well, it's got to be them because it's only Forum Energy that is a service contractor in Reed Bank, and the gas is really in Reed Bank. We don't have to talk about any other area.
Are you seeing other options that might not materialize, sir?
Well, it's possible that there could be some kinks towards the end, but I'm hopeful that China will continue because they have offered the same terms to Vietnam. That means they see this as really the solution to the South China Sea dispute, which will be a win-win solution for everyone. Win for China because they get 40%, win for us because we get 60, and we preserve our sovereign rights.
What should we be careful about, sir?
We should be careful. We should not deviate from the MOU and the TOR.
That's what's important.
Yes.
What about a joint exploration with another country? Because I guess some would be simply thinking that why go into a deal with the very country that you have conflicting claims with?
Well, first of all, we're going into a deal with China because China finally, impliedly, agrees that we have sovereign rights. Because it's like when you rent an apartment, you sign a lease contract, you impliedly admit that
You're a tenant.
you are a tenant,
Yeah.
you don't own it.
Yeah.
That the lessor owns it. It's just like that. When you are a service contractor, you admit you don't own it. It's owned by the country that gives you the service contract. That's basically it.
That's an analogy. of
That's
what
an
is happening
analogy,
here.
but in the service contract it's even more precise because the service contract says whereas the Philippines has sovereign rights over the resources in Reed Bank. So there is a clear admission, but we don't put it in express terms.
Yeah. We'll be taking another short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, retired Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. Sir, joint exploration with Russia, because there is such a thing with Vietnam.
Yes, I think we should spread our service contracts. We should offer service contracts to Russia, to the European nations, and to North American nations. But of course, China brings to the table something else, peace and stability, and we can give China a large part, a bigger area for the service contracts. But we should not limit ourselves to China. Of course, China will want to get everything, but we should resist that. And it's a good move for the president to invite Russia.
And because he did that already,
Yeah.
looking into a possible joint exploration with Russia. Sir, very quickly, the vice presidential protest, you have Associate Justice Marvic Leonin now, who is the member in charge in the protest. I actually was asking somebody about this. What happens to Justice Kagiwa dahil nga there was two who dissented, which is you and Justice Kagiwa, and then 11 who said, file your comments and a memoranda. Ganun ho ba yung system? Because this is the PET. The Supreme Court sitting as pet. There's no precedent, obviously, in the past on this, no, sir?
There's none, but if this were an ordinary case, not a pet case, the procedure would be if you lose in a major incident, then you have to give up the case to the ponente of the other side.
Yeah.
In pet, we don't have that practice before because we have very few cases. But we just carried over the same practice. So Justice Kagiwa graciously gave it up. He said, I will not handle it anymore.
Yeah. How disappointed are you, if at all, with this vote of 11-2, sir?
Well, of course, we lost, and I'm disappointed. But remember, the majority did not say that it should not be dismissed. They just said, we want to hear the parties first. And they might actually decide it the way we argued. But of course, I'm just hoping that they would. But my point is they have not yet decided.
No. They're asking for a memoranda
Yes, that's
and
right.
comments. In fact, Associate Justice Marvic Leonin was saying, you do not want a court to condemn without hearing. No matter what the consequences are, you do not want to condemn. But would this also, sir, definitely, this will prolong the process on the protest?
It will prolong the process. In the HRET and the SET, the House of Representative Electoral Tribunal and the Senate Electoral Tribunal, we follow the same rule. If you cannot show substantial recovery in the pilot precincts, we just dismiss it.
Right.
And I wanted that followed also, but they said, well, let's hear all the parties first.
And that's exactly what the PET is doing. Sir, what are your thoughts on the president offering the drug czar role to Vice President Leni Robredo?
Well, remember the president campaigned on the promise that within 6 months he will eliminate the drug problem. And after 6 months, he said maybe 2 years. And after 2 years, he said, I cannot eliminate it during my term, and maybe it will continue. So I think it's not fair to tell the Vice President, here, you have 6 months to do it. I mean, the President himself admits it cannot be done in 6 months.
So how would you describe the President's war on drugs?
Well,
Is it trying? Is it trying to be successful? Is it a failure?
well, I think worldwide you have to see what happened in outside countries, and this kind of war on drugs where you go after the peddlers and be harsh on them has never worked. First of all, I said this before during the oral arguments, that we must go after the drug lords, not the small-time traffickers in the street, because there are fewer drug lords, and you can monitor them. You know how they bring in the shabu, and we know it all comes from China.
Does it need tweaking?
Well, I think there has to be a shift of emphasis. Go after the drug lords, those who have laboratories, because all these laboratories, they have to cook the shabu, and the neighborhood would know. So all you have to do is go after the laboratories. And, I've been in the court for 18 years, and I have not come across personally a case where the accused were chemists, and the chemists are mostly Chinese. It's always the small-time peddlers, 0.01 grams of shabu.
Sir, very last question. Would you consider entering politics?
No, I have no plans because I think my advocacy on the West Philippine Sea will take most of my time, and I don't want to be distracted from that.
Maraming salamat to retired Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. Sir, always good to see you. I'm sure we'll still have you. Mas lalo na ngayon, sir.
Thank you.
Because you're not with us. You're retired already. Maraming salamat. Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.